attending this meeting and looking forward to great presentations. We've got a great presenters today. First, Julia Peak from USDN will speak, and Julia joined USDN in 2019 as the communications director, and in this role she helps members use a variety of resources to connect with constituents and stakeholders to inspire action. And then we'll have Dr. Michael Shank, who's the communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, the group of international cities committed to achieving aggressive long-term carbon reduction goals. And the most important thing to know about Michael is that he lives in Vermont, where he runs a small animal sanctuary. So we know someone's got some good company during this shelter-in-place time. So take it away, Julia.
Oh, thank you so much. So, hey everybody, it's great to kind of meet those of you who I haven't met yet, and looking forward to get to know all of you and hear more about what you're working on, and look forward to working together. I'm actually going to kick it. Michael and I are going to sort of do this together. He actually, top secret, he actually did most of the work. So you can see this beautiful CNCA deck here that he put together. And so he's going to lead us off. I'm going to chime in here or there, and you all can chime in as well and ask questions, make comments. You can do it verbally, you can do it in the chat box. This is not the kind of thing where you guys all have to like be silent until the end when we open it up. Like, if you have questions, let's do it. We're going to have some conversation and discussion, and we'll have some questions for you partway through this as well. So buckle up. It's going to be a whirlwind 30 minutes.
Buckle up. I love it. Hey, everyone. So glad to be with you and to tackle this topic. How do we communicate buildings, the electrification of buildings, the decarbonization of buildings, language that we will encourage you not to use in terms of decarbonizing buildings. We're going to jump in, lots of pictures, tick through quickly some ideas, tease it out, and then hopefully workshop some stuff with you shortly. All right, so let me just click on my screen. The competition is fierce for the public's hearts and minds. Every other green behavior that you can think of has a lot of celebrity behind it, has a lot of marketing behind it, has a lot of glitz and glam behind it. We, in the electric vehicle category, have plenty of spokespersons for us, plenty of messengers in the celebrity category for us. Buildings don't yet have that, but we want them to be there, to be in competition with EVs, to be in competition with something as basic as recycling. So when people are thinking about going green, to thinking about their buildings too. So in thinking about your networks, your communities, who are your messengers, who are your surrogates who could speak on behalf of either commercial or residential buildings, and how do we start recruiting celebrities to speak out about this, start getting product placement in films too. Everything I've just shown you has rich product placement in films. We are not yet there with buildings, but we should be soon. So we want to work on that with you. One big building problem that we want to circumvent ASAP is the language used. And even in the intro, I heard that the previous pre-BEI title was something about decarbonization. Don't want to use that language with the public, no surprise there, but also energy retrofits. I know New York City, so please forgive me, but retrofit accelerators, language that could get in the way of communicating what we want, the action we want, the activity we want, the ask we want. And so I strongly encourage all our cities on the CNCA side not to use net zero anything, carbon neutrality, deep decarbonization, retrofit accelerators, and instead just talking about plugging in our buildings, electrifying our buildings, renewable heating and cooling, language that people understand because there's a precedent for it in other categories, in other behaviors, in other asks. The opportunity here, first with commercial, I used to work in the Empire State Building at the first level of lights. You can see it's kind of caked out with levels of lighting on the 72nd floor, one of my favorite working environments. The ESB, if you've been there, does a great job if you're a tourist and you're about to take a tour of the Empire State Building, does a great job of informing you, educating you, engaging you on how they've gone green. They force you, while you're waiting in line to get your ticket, to learn all about what they've done to go green. I had many pictures here that I could show you of what they've done. If you've been there, you know it. So how are we using our commercial buildings, our city buildings, to educate the public, engage the public on how we've made the building green in whatever way we have? Burlington Airport, I live in Vermont, as Tyler mentioned, or as Billy mentioned, and I am very happy with how Burlington Airport has educated users all throughout the airport. There's a lot of messaging, a lot of signage about how they've gone green. But residential offers that opportunity too. And I love marketing from the 1950s around homes and the electrification of homes. And props to Burlington Electric Department. If you've seen their logo, it captures some of that old 1950s marketing posters back then. There, if you've not seen their logo, it fits this. But how do we start telling the story of a cozy, comfortable home that is electric, that is green, that is saving us money, that is safer? And how do we storytell either residentially or commercially or even with city infrastructure? So that's what we're going to get into today, building out campaigns with storytellers, ideally you. And Tyler is getting his heat pumps installed today, or it started yesterday. And so at the beginning of the call, I was talking to him how we'd call him out. How could he, as a leader in the BEI space, in the city space, start to storytell his own experience and the struggles with it, so that people watching him, people knowing him, people in his circle and his network get a little bit of that social norming benefit? Because when we see someone else with solar, we're more likely to get solar if our neighbor has solar. Same with heat pumps. How do we as leaders, as influencers, storytell too, and tap people within our community to storytell for us? Now, building the public will. Before we get into the campaign, we need to know what the public's thinking on these issues, on building electrification, on gas ban, methane regulation, all of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia. She's going to talk us through a few of the Climate Nexus data, their slides. You'll have more of that in subsequent sessions, second and third, I think. But we just wanted to touch on a few very quickly because it will inform our campaign work.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so we can send you this info separately if you would also like it after the call. Climate Nexus is for those of you who don't know, a nonprofit in New York City that does massive amounts of media, polling, messaging, et cetera, work around climate change and sustainability. So first, Americans aren't sure about the impact of gas on climate change. Only about a quarter say it's making it worse. That's not very many people. And the takeaway from this could be one of two things. You might see this and think, oh my gosh, we need to teach people about how natural gas, which we'll get to that idea later, about how gas contributes to climate change, or which would be a long, uphill, costly battle that you don't have the time or the money to fight. Or you could just say, for most people, talking about climate change is not going to be the #1 way to get them to switch from gas. Right? Like, it's just, the reality is that a lot of people don't understand what this is about. And so we don't have the time or money to teach all of them. So you got to know your community. If your community knows about the connection between gas and climate, then that's great. But if they don't, which according to this, they probably don't, that's not something you're going to want to lean on heavily. Next. So, like I said, natural gas. What is natural gas? So we were talking about this the other day. Apparently, natural gas came out of just a term for the technology, like the refinement process. But it also happens that calling it natural gas turned out to be a very tricky, clever thing for us to overcome, because when we say natural gas, it feels like maybe it's not actually so bad. So one thing that we really want to encourage folks to do is to get away from talking about natural gas and just calling it gas. You know, for some folks in rural areas, that might conjure up, you know, other kinds of fuels, generators, et cetera. But for most folks, like, starting to switch into just saying gas is going to be a better way to eliminate that confusion and to help people make those connections environmentally when we do want them to make the connection.
I'll just add a quick note here. As a city or county, you probably can't say a dirty gas, or maybe you don't want to prejudice it that strongly in terms of demonizing or vilifying, but at least we could say a fossil fuel every time we talk about gas, fossil gas, or anything that classifies it as a bad, even if you can't use something more pejorative like dirty.
Right. Anything other than natural is basically what we're saying, because natural makes it seem like it's really not so bad. And that's what we want to get away from. This, again, along the same lines, folks don't really understand whether natural gas is clean or not, when you give them some messaging to explain that it's actually dirty, it does help. You can see here that like before the messaging, more people think it's clean. After the messaging, fewer people think it's clean. But again, it's like a 10-point difference. You still have about half of people after being told that it's dirty that still aren't sure. So I'm just reiterating that like this idea that we're going to educate everybody so they understand this is going to not actually be probably the most efficient way for us to get to where we want to go. So this is harder to convince people of than you would think. So again, for some audiences, we'll get to some of this later, for some audiences, this may be effective, but for most audiences, it's actually not going to be the quickest way to get to where you want to go. We also, it's interesting here looking at framing. So when you frame electrification positively, as opposed to calling it a gas ban, people are more likely to support it. It's still not overwhelming. You can see it varies wildly state by state. So this is a great illustration of a couple things. So one, even in the states where there's a lot of favor, we still have a ways to go in building support for this. But also that it does vary wildly by state. So not only do you need to know about what your state is thinking, but it's really important to have a sense of being able to take the temperature, so to speak, of your community and where they're at on this, because again, what people understand and what people favor varies wildly. It also shows us that framing a lot of this in a positive way is more convincing for more people than framing it as a negative. So like a gas ban, it's like, ooh, that's a little anxiety inducing. I still don't really understand all of this, right? This is complicated. I don't totally get gas. I don't totally get what my other options are. But now you're telling me there's a gas ban. And like, I don't know. Now I'm anxious. I don't know if this is a good idea, right? For a lot of folks, that's how they're going to feel about it. So talking about 100% electrification feels less threatening, feels more empowering. It's giving me more options. It's pointing to what I'm going to gain instead of what I'm going to lose. And since we generally don't like losing things, we tend to gravitate away from that. Again, for communities that understand more about what this means and what they do benefit from, they're more likely to gravitate to it. But just most communities aren't there yet. Lastly, we've got this piece. So good news, electric appliances are seen as just as affordable and easy to maintain as gas. That's great. So we don't have to convince people that they're easy. We don't have to convince people that they're affordable. That's really good news because that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Now, when it comes to specific appliances, we will have some barriers to overcome. For instance, when most people think of electric stoves, they think crap cooking, right? I hate cooking on electric stoves. Like cheap electric stoves, they are the worst if you love cooking. But we can explain to people, oh, there's like all these other options where you can do amazing electric cooking, and there's induction cooking, and there's all these things. So we'll get to that later. But it's good to know that we have at least a base of people being like, yeah, I'm open to electric. Tell me more. And we have that a majority of folks support incentives and rebates to switch from gas to electric. So again, thinking about the piece about gas bans, it's like, not so sure about the gas ban, but if we're talking about a switch to electric and we're talking about some money to help us do it, now I'm interested. Now you're talking. You're going to give me some cash. I'm going to get some cool stuff. It's going to be more efficient. Like now people are much more likely to support it. You can see that a majority of adults strongly or somewhat support that. What's interesting though is another 20% still just aren't sure, which again points to like we have a lot of headroom here. Some of those folks who aren't sure are not going to be in favor, right? We probably won't win them over, but a lot of them we could if we just had a little bit more clarity, a little bit more connection with them. To bring them over into using these other appliances. It also shows that the program itself, like the actual money behind this, the incentives, the rebates, what you can do from a financial perspective will make a big impact on whether people will make the switch or not, which no brainer makes sense, but that's a really important piece of this too.
Let me just add on this slide, we highly encourage you to use any local polling or market data that you have to use as a talking point to impress upon the people that there's a movement happening and you can help social norm these activities and behaviors by saying 6 out of 10 of us Politicians do this all the time. The majority of the American people want the following. Of course, you want to use good data and make sure it's backed up by good data, but this is a talking point where you impress upon the people like, look, this is widespread. People want this. People are supporting our policies in this particular practice. So use these data, and I know you'll have more time with Nexus later, which is great. They produce good stuff. Use these data to your benefit as talking points. All right, so now let's get into some messaging, and we're going to look at what's working in the kind of household appliance market. And Nest is a great example of messaging the magic of home and how much we love home. So thinking again about storytelling, using residential buildings as billboards, commercial buildings as billboards to storytell. And these are our priority messages that we're encouraging. Obviously, you're probably using an assortment of these already. We'll get into some examples of cities and counties using these messages. We bury climate friendly at the last because we think the first three are going to reach a wider audience. Now, clearly, if you're doing some audience segmentation, which Julia will talk about, and your audience is an environmental NGO and environmental community, you could lead with climate friendly, but we strongly support leading with clean and safe, comfortable, cost efficient, knowing that those are going to appeal to basic human needs first and foremost. And when people think about their home, these are likely how they're prioritizing things in their home. They want it to be clean, they want it to be secure and safe, they want to be comfortable, they want to save money, and lastly, probably in their prioritization, yes, they want to do good for the environment. Over to you, Julia.
So this is Nest. You know, Nest is now with Google, so there's a whole different thing about it, and their marketing isn't as nice, but that's okay. Nest, here, what I love about Nest is they use these like little mini snapshots that people can relate to advertise the product. So instead of saying, you know, location, like location enabled, so you can always find your device, they say, find your phone under any couch cushion. Because they're showing us, they're giving you this moment of like, oh my God, when you're looking for it and you're like lifting up the couch and you're like, where is my stuff? And so they're using these little snapshots that are very relatable in order to talk about a piece of functionality. And that's like a mini way of storytelling. Same thing here, lock your doors and arm the alarm, even if your hands are full. So again, it's a very small thing, but instead of saying voice activated arming of alarm, they're giving you this picture of like, oh my gosh, I know, like when I have my hands full and I'm trying to do these things, it's so frustrating. Same thing with save money, stay comfortable. Stay under the covers until it's just right. So again, you could have said like voice activated temperature control. So boring. Okay. But now you've been like, oh yeah, when I'm under the covers and it's cold, like for those of, I'm from Minnesota originally, and you're just like, oh my God, it's 6 a.m. and it's 20 below and I don't want to get up and I just don't want to. And then it just like, oh, you mean I could just tell my thermostat to turn it up? Like I'm suddenly now much more interested in this device because you've given me the experience that I want to have. You showed me the experience instead of just giving me a dry fact, which like produces no feelings. Same thing here, superior precision on your cooktop. Like I want superior precision, and that's fish, and fish is expensive and hard to cook. So now, again, a whole story has been told about how I'm gonna have perfectly cooked fish, and I always mess that up, and et cetera, et cetera. So rather than, you know, you can adjust by degree on your cooktop. So it's a dry fact versus an interesting snapshot vignette that elicits experience and emotion. Here, this is USGBC, and this is also just like a great way to talk about livability, right? This is their tagline, I think, is their new tagline: better buildings equal better lives. If you're ever just looking for some nice building marketing, if you just peruse their website, they've got a lot of that language in there. It's a good place. Living Buildings Institute has some of that too. You know, these folks have a lot of money and they hire consultants to write their stuff. So take a look at it if you're ever stuck, for how to talk about kind of gnarly stuff in a accessible way.
All right, so we just pulled up a couple pictures of some of the competition out there, not in the renewable heating and cooling category, but in the non-renewable. But just look at this as an example, and we're going to contrast this with some examples from our cities and counties and states shortly. Here, we're seeing a prioritized $1,700 in rebates. We're seeing a $59 AC check. The money leads. My eyes are drawn to $1,700, $59, and then the guy's eyes, for some reason, like his eyes are really, I'm looking at it. I'm attracted to his eyes. I'm attracted to the $1,700 rebate. I'm attracted to the $59 check that I'm going to receive. This may feel cheap and base and low, but it works, and we can take some lessons from the marketing that precedes us. Same here. We're going to pay you. We'll pay you. That leads. The $30 I see first and foremost. Everything else is buried. I'm attracted. I'm hooked by the $30. Same with here. We found some of this marketing about heat pumps used for pools. Obviously not where you're going to be spending most of your time, because you're looking at heating, cooling, and kitchen appliances and hot water heaters, etc. But what do we lead with here? We lead with quality of life. We lead with family. We lead with smiles. We lead with summer. We lead with exclamation marks. Lots of positive energy, bright colors, more heat for less money, great tagline. So thinking about how we can capture some of these marketing techniques used by corporates already existing in this space.
So we want to just take a couple examples from a few folks who are leading on this work. And so first of all, huge kudos.
Hey, Julie, I think
Needs all of you who are doing this work right here. This is from City of Boulder and Boulder County Energy Smart Program, like massive. And we just wanted to take this as a moment where we could all, given what we just talked about with our little vignette, snapshot, storytelling, family, quality of life, all those pieces, take a look at a few examples and think about how might we tweak some of these to make them even more compelling and give them even more pop and make them more relatable and draw us in. So just either shout it out, or if shouting it out doesn't work for you, pop it in the chat box so we can see what we can look at. And you can see Michael's highlighted some of these bullets here are especially what we're looking at. How might we rewrite some of those? This is an open brainstorm. You're not going to be graded. It's all good.
Can you hear me? I
Yes.
guess one reaction that I have to this is there are a lot of words. And so I would really take out a lot of the words and maybe try and summarize, or even those bullet points down there, you know, capture kind of the key point in those, and thinking back to the other examples, like put them in bubbles, or, you know, really make them pop out versus all the words. I like the image on the top. That really communicates nicely to me, but it's all the words that I find aren't as compelling.
People are saying this on chat too. Too many words, more images, less text. Since you do like the image at top, we want to strongly encourage you to never use stock images. I see stock images and I dismiss the advertisement immediately. I don't know if this is a stock image, meaning something they've pulled off some website somewhere. Ideally, you're using local leaders, real people in your community, because it's going to be a lot more believable as a result.
Yep, and I seeing more in the chat box. We've got, if you do know how much money the average residents save a year, that's huge. That's awesome information to highlight and to put the dollar figure if you can figure it out. Yep, saving money. We've got a lot of that. We got a cute dog. Agree. More efficient. Goldilocks your home all year round. Exactly. So for example, like, I don't know about you, but I generally don't feel like I really enjoy control in my home. But this idea of like a cool bedroom and a warm living room, like a little bit of a Goldilocks, can never quite get it right. Like, here's the way to solve your problem. 2 for 1, that's a great one. Everyone loves a BOGO. The compressor in the image is confusing. Yes. So this is awesome. These are great, great ideas and great pieces of advice here. Michael, do you want to move on to the next one?
Yes, all caps free, Tyler, totally agree, love it. Yes.
Yes.
NYSERDA. We got one from NYSERDA here. Similar query to everyone. So here they're listing all in one. This is why I screenshot this from their video. They have a video animation. And I pulled this because here they're featuring all the benefits that you get from choosing heat pumps. Based on what we just looked at in terms of our market competition, how might we change this? Julia, when she was looking at this, she said to me, because they move heat rather than convert it. Said, how many people are going to track with that statement and understand it immediately?
Like, man, I've been looking for something to move heat rather than convert it for years. Like,
Yeah.
said very few people. Now, to be fair, this is about how it works. So they are trying to explain in easy to understand language how it works. But even something like move heat rather than convert it is like, what does that mean? And what do people really need to understand about how something works, right?
They're also giving equal weight to each four, and I don't know that we should. I think we should take time to lead with what people care most about, going back to our 4 C's, in terms of it being clean and safe, comfortable, cost efficient, and then climate friendly. So take time to lead with what might resonate most with audiences versus kind of giving an average 25% to each one here in this case.
Yeah, and agree. I just wanted to shout out what Catherine said too. Like the top line captions are okay, but then the subtitles make it confusing. So it's like quiet and efficient. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. And then I'm like, wait, move heat rather than convert it. Now I'm like, now I'm less drawn. Like,
there's some great comments.
Did really great. It was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Autumn saying safer for you and your family versus safer operations. Excellent.
Yes, love that.
And same here. So Sacramento on the left, NRDC on the right, 2 images we pulled. So thinking about the storytelling that Julia was mentioning earlier and capturing a moment that people can relate to, how might we rewrite what's on the left to capture that moment, something everyone can identify with, like, oh yeah, I've been there and I don't want to experience that again, and you're going to sell me something that helps me alleviate it.
I can get dinner on the table faster. Love that.
Beth, thank you. Precise doesn't relate from Gina. Faster and easier than gas. Nice.
Yeah. Real picture. Yep. Nailed the noodles. Love it.
Nailed the noodles. Love it. Yeah, that's great.
Yep. Easier to clean.
Hopefully everyone's seeing these chats too, because I know we're missing a bunch of good chats coming out. Like Jenna, I know you mentioned on the video from NYSERDA that we missed heating and cooling. Instant heat. That's nice. Make baths a not so guilty pleasure. I love it. Healthy dinner, healthy home. This is all really good stuff. Moving on. So this, some folks probably have seen out of Boulder. They did a couple-minute videos around these 4 actions. You can see on the top left: improve energy efficiency, electrifying heating and cooling, driving electric. And the rest of the pictures have to do with one of those quadrants. He got rid of gas. He and his wife got rid of gas and got heat pumps. This is getting close to what we'd love to see more of. When we build a movement and we capitalize on social norming, how do we storytell members of your community making the switch, electrifying, fill in the blank, and then help them storytell and post their videos on a site, either your site or a partner site, a third-party site, so that we're creating a movement, we're creating a community virtually where people can say, oh, that's my neighbor, they switched and they're loving it. So some of those stories don't come out naturally because we don't often talk about our homes to other people. We can see an electric vehicle being driven, we can see solar outside, but we don't often get to see this stuff. So that's why videos are really important. We're not going to play this video, but I like what Boulder did here because it was starting to tell the story of a real person in Boulder making the switch. Sierra Club, I appreciated their video, and I just screenshot one aspect of the video where they're showing fumes from the kitchen leaking up the stairs into the baby's bedroom, and it's visceral. I mean, ideally you would have real people, but short of that, we've got animation, but very visceral, gets to the safety issue strongly. And so how can we tap into that without doing too much fear-based marketing? Because again, as Julia noted, positively framing electrification versus gas banning tracks with more people. So framing it in the positive, but how do we discreetly use the safety and security risks to our benefit? Okay, so building a campaign, mapping first. Over to you, Julia.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, just a real quick nod to this. Those of you who've done any of my other like workshops or learning groups know I use this like half the time, and I know it's a lot, but it's because it's so important. Who are you talking to is so important. So I just want to encourage everyone as you're building these programs and campaigns and outreach to be really clear about who your audience is. And this is a generic audience map that can be customized for any initiative or campaign you have. But it's just a way to keep grounded in who specifically are you talking to, like specifically, not moms. Like moms, not an audience, not enough of an audience. Like moms in what neighborhoods, moms of what income, single moms, married moms, like how many, I mean, there's so many different kinds of moms. So you want to be specific about your audience, and you want to be clear about what do they care about, what are their values, and this is where the environmental piece comes in. Maybe they are really keyed into environmental stuff. Maybe they're really looking for saving costs. Maybe it's all about, quality of life and, quicker dinner, faster, that kind of thing. And then to also be clear about barriers, because here is where I know you're going to talk about this later, but just a quick nod to program design. Like you want to make sure that you're asking people to do something they can actually do. So, someone had earlier asked, like, aren't electric, like really nice electric stoves, especially induction stoves, expensive? Like, yes, they can be expensive. Heat pumps can be a high cost burden initially. So just making sure that your program is designed in a way that people can actually use and access it, and that you're only advertising it to the people who can access it. So I know that you're one of the big focuses of this group is equitably scaling solutions, which is amazing and perfect. But it's like, just be really conscientious of making sure that the people you're asking can actually utilize the program that you're advertising at the time, and that it's not too hard, it's not too expensive, it doesn't require too many phone calls, et cetera, et cetera. And then again, thinking about messaging, et cetera. I'm happy to talk more about this at some point in terms of how do you really build out a campaign that reaches people where they are, how to use Nextdoor, for instance. That's a great place to do this stuff. But I will just leave it at that for now. It's just like, be really clear about who you're talking to, make sure your program is actually accessible to them, because the worst thing is to be asked to do something that you cannot actually do. It just feels demoralizing. And also you don't want to waste your money and your time on that because y'all are busy. So you want to make sure that you're connecting with the right people at the right time.
We are not going to go through all of these, but we wanted to highlight some of ideas42.org, their work. So if you want more time to delve into and deep dive into behavior change communications, check out Ideas42. That's where I'm pulling this from. But in thinking about what stands in the way of behavior change or what motivates behavior change, we just want to identify a few of these very quickly. Social norming, we've already talked about. Given that this is inside the home, how do we storytell so that other people can see what's happening, so that you're getting messengers from your community, your surrogates for this campaign, to speak on behalf of what's happening inside their home so that people outside their home can learn, can be socially normed as a result. Other things like choice overload. Certainly in the heat pump space, even in the green behavior space, there's a lot to do. People feel overwhelmed with all the things they need to do to go green. So be careful about how you present it on your site and not overwhelming them with so many options. How do I do this? And if they're motivated, if they're ready to go, it has to be as hassle-free as possible. So the contractors are teed up. Tyler even talked about that in his experience. They didn't make it easy for him. It was not hassle-free. So how do we make it as hassle-free as possible? So if they're ready to go, they're motivated by the 4 C's that we talked about. They're like, yes, let's do this. And then there's a barrier, whether it's a cost barrier or others. We may only have one shot for them to do it. Otherwise, they'll use this moment and say, no, I was going to, but I checked it out and it wasn't for me. It was too expensive. It's too hard to get. The contractor didn't know what to do. and then they're done. We had that one moment, we've lost them. So again, we're not going to tick through all of these. I will send Tyler and Rupal some longer writings we've done on this and how these behavior change categories and components can be applied to climate sustainability communications. But just wanting folks to be mindful of this, similar to the audience mapping, very helpful before you launch a campaign. Where we want to end with is this, and we have some takeaways. We have a little worksheet that Tyler and Rupal will send out to continue the conversation and hopefully get some good data from you that you can share with us so that we actually move into creation, into campaign creation and communications here. Messages we've already covered with some of the C's. Feel free to build out on that or dispute that. We'd love to be in conversation about what messages are working locally for you, and maybe there are more that we didn't identify. This is really important, tapping messengers to speak for us and to see yourself as a messenger too. If you are electrifying your home, tell that story. Tell that story on social so that people see it as relatable. I electrified my home a couple of years ago when I moved to Vermont, in part to see what are the difficulties, how expensive is it going to be. I wanted to walk the talk, but I also wanted to figure out the problems so that I could relate those problems to others and help them through it. See yourself as a leader in this space and as a messenger in this space. Obviously, we want to use language that the mainstream majority is using, not that multisyllabic stuff that we talked about earlier. We want to communicate it with the kind of marketing potential that we mentioned earlier that our competition is using. We want to repeat it often. And I'm not going to go through all of these because some of these M's aren't as relevant as others, and I'm mindful of time, so I want to capture the most key ones here. Meetups, I think this is relevant. Think of your reporters and your communicators professional in your city and county and how they can be advocates for you. Help reporters understand the technology too, so next time they write on it, one, they're quoting you, and two, they're writing about it properly, because reporters can really screw up progress here if they don't know the technology themselves. Also meeting up with contractors to make sure they're communicating clearly too for the audience. This may be tough, but as we discovered in our brainstorm, it's possible in terms of showing how life is better and making this stuff palatable on social. It takes a little work, takes a little creativity, but based on the chat function, we've got a lot of creative ideas. Let's use them. Let's have fun with it. Walk the talk. Again, we need to be doing this stuff. Hopefully everyone is, if we want the community to do it. So we need to lead by example. Magic, watch a Geico commercial to get an example of that. They spend a lot of time entertaining and then they sell you on the product at the end. Let's have fun with this. Let's make our marketing entertaining for people before we ask for a sale at the end. Again, with mimicry, mirroring, movement building, how do we mirror back a movement so that people don't feel like they're alone, they feel like they're contributing to a community and they're socially normed by the mirroring back mimicry. We are animals at the end of the day and we will mimic what others are doing. So how do we mirror back what others are doing in the community that we've tapped as messengers? And video is going to be really useful for that. We're going virtual now with everything. So now's a great opportunity to ask member X, Y, and Z of the community, hey, would you be willing to do a little fun video, 1 or 2 minutes, about how you've electrified your home and the benefits of it and how life is better? We'd love to feature that on our social, those kind of things. I would love to turn it over. Let's see how much time we have left. 3 minutes. Turn it over to Tyler, but before I do, Julia, do you have any additional comments before we close our presentation?
I don't think so. I think the only other thing to think about is as you're doing this, some of the campaign building, mirroring, like we know that now more than ever, people trust their peers more than they trust anyone else. And so getting peers to share is important. And another way you can do that is if you are talking to neighborhood associations, other community-based organizations, nonprofits, whatever, who are also interested in this and interested in talking to people about this, like they can also share this. It doesn't all have to be you. You don't have to be the keeper of all the things, all the videos, all the advertising, all the talking to people. Like if you're willing to allow other groups who have their own interests in this to do some of their own sharing and their own spreading, like that's actually better. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well as you're going forward.
And as you fill out those worksheets and submit them to us, we're very keen to work with you on these campaigns. So we assume this is one of many conversations going forward in the build out of some of these ideas. Thanks, everyone. Over to you, Tyler.
Yeah, awesome. Billy, are you still on? If you could either provide some kind of closing reactions and then help wrap up.
Yeah, no, it was great presentation, super positive. I love the snapshot vignette versus the sort of factoids, and I think the creativity on the chat showed that people really got that message. So I want to. We're running up on time, so I want to thank the speakers, Julia and Michael. Thank both of you for sharing the information on the call. We look forward to getting the additional information, the worksheets. You guys are always entertaining and informative. And we'll leave the question open for 5 minutes or so after the meeting if people have additional questions. If you guys can stay on for a little bit, that'd be great. So our next learning group call in this series is scheduled for Wednesday, June 10th. And you can sign up at usdn.org if you haven't already. And next month, we're going to continue this communication theme with the presentation from Climate Nexus, who Julia referenced. They're at the forefront of the national conversation on climate change, and they've done fantastic polling and messaging, working on building electrification and local gas bans. They have messaging both pro and against, so they really bridge both of those avenues. So we're looking forward to hearing from Climate Nexus on lessons and guidance, and we plan to highlight some of the great and challenging communications and engagement work happening within the USDN communities. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk to you next month.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.